Hey there, everybody, this is the oddly illuminated Evan. I have got my screen brightness and I turned off the reader, so it really lights things up and I look odd in the video. Sorry, I'll probably change it eventually. Today we're talking about verbs, fancy language lesson verbs. This is a word you probably have heard, and there's a chance you don't know what the heck the word means. In fact, there's some disconnect between verbs and verbs in Japanese and verbs in English. Because in both languages, verbs are where there's a lot of grammar. So example, I eat, I can eat, I ate, I might eat, I want to eat, I was eating, there was some eating taking place, eating is delicious. All of these, it's the same word, and yet there's so much weird stuff happening to them. I need to eat, I might eat. And in Japanese, taberu, tabemasu, tabemashita, tabeta, tabeteiru, tabeteita, taberareru, tabesaserareru, tabesasete kudasai. All of these strange constructs happen with the verbs. So verbs are very important, and yet there's this odd disconnect. One of the chief disconnects between verbs in English and Japanese, and this is what I'm talking about, is the copula. The verb is or was. These are be verbs. We call them be verbs, like the verb I will be there, be. Is, am, are, were, was, all of those guys. Those are called be verbs. Those are copulas, and copulas in English are verbs, whereas in Japanese, they're either definitely not verbs or they're this gray area. So once again, our definitions of words are there's a core, and then there's a gray area outside of it, and then there's some scattered whoopty-boopties. Okay, anyway, every predicate, we've talked about predicates in a different video, in English has a verb. In Japanese, it's a bit vague because copulas. And also, e-adjectives don't have a verb with them. So when I say kore, oishii, there's no real verb happening. So e-adjectives and sentences that have complements in them, we'll talk about complements later, like descriptions, it gets a little bit tricky in Japanese. In English, every predicate has a verb. So even if they don't have a verb in Japanese, when we translate them into English, they will have a verb in the English translation, because English requires a predicate to have a verb, and a sentence in Japanese and in English is a subject and a predicate. Sometimes the subject isn't mentioned, sometimes the predicate isn't mentioned, but it's still there. All right, a verb is less than stellarly defined as a word that shows action. This is a less than stellar definition, but this is what we were all taught in grade school, at least here in Ohio. Not really the best definition because it falls apart very quickly. I mean, the word is, there's no action. I am Evan. I'm not Evaning anything. So it's a bit strange. This will work to get started, but it'll soon fall apart. Verbs and related words in Japanese and English usually contain when the sentence happens. In English and in Japanese, we put time into our verbs. I went to the store. I am going to the store. I go to the store every day. I will go to the store tomorrow. I'm adding time words like tomorrow and every day in there, but even if I don't have those words, I will go to the store. We still know what's happening in the future. We just don't know exactly when. So our time exists in the verbs. If I were to screw things up, if I said I went to the store tomorrow, there's a time disconnect. Or you're playing some weird game where the future is strange. You're in Back to the Future. Okay, so in verbs in Japanese and in English, but also e-adjectives a little bit, they all have time included in them. E-adjectives have, in Japanese, e-adjectives have time inside of them, verbs have time inside of them, and copula have time inside of them. But this statement is true, verbs have the time in them. Okay. We can best identify what words are verbs by looking at how they operate in a sentence. Exactly, just like with nouns. Just look at how they operate in a sentence, and you can see that they're a verb. Okay, great. I eat pizza. Perfect sentence. I eat pizza. Whoops. So the subject is I, the predicate is eat pizza. I is a noun and pizza is a noun, and the verb is eat. Notice how the action that is happening is you're taking pizza and shoving it in your mouth, chewing it and swallowing it on a regular basis, right? The time is on a regular basis, and what you're doing is shoving pizza into your mouth. That's what the word eat means. So the eat represents an action, and that's what it is. She is drinking coffee. So this is a little bit strange. Is the verb is or is the verb drink? Notice drinking. Maybe we're describing her as being a drinking thing. Let's not get into too detailed, but basically the verb is drink. She is drinking coffee. She is the subject. She's a noun. Coffee is a noun. The predicate is drinking coffee. And it's best to describe this, well, it's easiest to see it as the drink is what's happening and the time frame is currently. She is drinking coffee. The action is drinking and it's happening right now, exactly. That door doesn't shut. Notice does is our time. It frequently, at any given time, does not. Notice we insert the negative idea into our verb, and the verb is shut. So the door does not shut. Subject, door, noun, doesn't shut, verbs. Here in English, we have auxiliary verbs, the does not, but we don't need to talk about that right now. The verb is shut, and yet doesn't is a very critical part of it. So let's just call that the verb for now, okay? But indeed, it's a bit strange. Yeah, this isn't really an action, is it? This is where that falls apart. This isn't really an action, right? The door doesn't shut. We're literally describing something that doesn't happen. I mean, we're literally describing the absence of an action, and yet shut is considered an action. Do you see? This isn't really an action, and yet we treat it like a verb. The same way that I eat pizza, I am drinking coffee, or the door is the same way that the door doesn't shut. Do you see how if we think about this like a machine and we take the gear of eat out and we put down doesn't shut, the gears are interchangeable. Just we end up with a strange sentence. I don't shut pizza. I don't shut pizza. Your brain, like, do you feel that? I don't shut pizza. Your brain's trying to think of what that could possibly mean. Like, your brain understands that we did subject, verb, object, and it operates properly because we can shut a door, we can shut a window, but I don't shut pizza? Like, what does that mean? But your brain's trying to figure out a meaning even though there is no meaning, because the sentence, we took one cog out and we replaced it with a different one. That's how languages work. It's literally just mathematics. If you're at the age where we've done algebra, we're just replacing variables. It's very fascinating. This math is a subset of language. There are studies done. People who do more language, if you focus mostly on language, you'll actually improve your math skills. If you start diagnosing all this stuff, math is a language. Okay, but science isn't a language. Science is just testing stuff over and over again. Empirical versus deductive. Anyway, I'm rambling. Yeah, exactly. It's not really an action. Okay, number 4. I am Evan. I'm Evan. There's no action happening. I'm just describing I and Evan, and I'm putting them together. There's no action. It's a description. How is this a verb? It is a verb, but it isn't a verb. And this is the fact that this is a verb in English, but if you think about it, there's no action taking place. This is where we start getting into the issue where Japanese says, nah, it's not a verb, it's a copula. We're going to differentiate the two. So, anyway, in English, that's definitely a verb, but again, it's not an action. Whereas Japanese, it's not really a verb, it's a copula. Totally didn't realize there was a 5th example. Excuse me, I scrolled down and I saw a 5th example. This is a fun one. Let's tag this in here. I'm going to edit this in. Notice I changed colors because I decided to take off the reader. So the light is now a nice warm color. Here's the sentence. By that time, it shouldn't have been being used. By that time, it shouldn't have been being used yet. That's a hell of a sentence. By that time, it should not have been being used yet. That's a 6-verb verb. Okay. Once again, I mentioned this briefly. We have auxiliary verbs in English. Should not have been being used. All right, let's look at this screwed up verb grouping. Used is the past participle of use. That's the actual verb, meat and potatoes. Be plus the past participle, so be used, causes the passive voice, right? Instead of I eat pizza, pizza was eaten. Yesterday, I ate a pizza. We can flip that. The passive voice is the pizza was eaten. Be plus the ing feeling, which would be being, creates the current continuous, the feeling that it's happening currently or at that time. The continuation feeling of the verb. Been being used. The been being used. The being used idea. This is the idea that it was continuous action. Have been plus verb. So here we have the have been. And this is a be verb that goes into be being. This creates the past action connected to the present. So there's a link between the present and... So we're at a meeting talking about what went wrong, and I'm describing that it shouldn't have been being used yet. You guys made a mistake, and that's what we're talking about now. There's a connection to now and this happening in the past. The not adds negativity, so it should not have been being used. And the should plus verb here creates the feeling that with the given information, the best conclusion is kind of a feeling. I don't know what the correct term for this is, but like, should has two meanings at least. You should go to the store, or he should be at the store right now. Do you see how those have completely different meanings? A suggestion, you should go to the store, versus he should be at the store right now? Like, with all the information that I have, the best conclusion is he should be at the store right now. Sorry, I'm teaching you guys English. The verb is used, but the whole thing is shouldn't have been being used. So anyway, highlighting the insanity of verbs and how important they are to grammar. That's a fantastic example in English. Number 6, running is fun. I talked about this earlier in the nouns video. This is another be verb. Notice is. So this is a be verb. Running is fun. We're describing running as being fun. But now look at the word running. Run is a verb, isn't it? And yet run here is actually a noun, right? Because the action of running is fun. So when we add an ing to a verb in English, we turn it into a gerund. And gerunds are nounified verbs. We do this in Japanese as well with particles like no. It's not even a particle. What am I talking about? We add no after verb or koto after verb or... that might be it, actually. Hopefully that helps you guys understand a little bit better what a verb is and what isn't a verb and the gray areas that exist with verbs and how if you don't get it, you're not a moron. You're not. It's just this is strange and there's artificial definitions being crammed on what we do. Linguistics is a fantastic study if you find this interesting. This is Evan. Peace out. And let's sing Vampirina.
We can sing Booty Vampirina.
You want to sing Booty Vampirina? What's that song? We're living the scream.
Whoa, Vampirina. I can make zoo. Vampirina.
Maybe blue with pointy teeth.
Me blue is